Welcome to the Other Side of Hell podcast. This is your host, Mark Musselman. Today, I am speaking with Molly Booker. Molly is a dear friend as well as a brilliant, beautiful, powerful woman who has an unquenchable thirst for learning all there is to learn, a self-described sensitive nerd who can't keep her nose out of a good book. She is a profoundly talented author and writer, is wise, thoughtful, honest, insanely talented, and recently married to her wife, Kelly, and relocated to Nashville, Tennessee. Molly joins me from her newly adopted home in Nashville. I say newly adopted because prior to moving to Nashville, Molly has lived her entire life in Colorado, like I have. So, two Colorado natives on the same call at the same time. That's some rarefied air. Molly, like most of us who have lived long enough, has had a handful of experiences that have taken her to her knees and had her experiencing that sense of hell on earth. Our conversation today promises to be real, raw, and ultimately will offer some relevant insights to any listener who's on the verge of, in the midst of, or has just passed through a significant challenge that has taken them to their knees. And now I bring you Molly Booker. Molly, um, before we jump into the story, I just want to see if you have anything you'd like to share about you that goes beyond my description of you that would help the sort of listeners get a sense of who you are.
Thank you, Mark. Oh my gosh, I'm delighted. I'm so excited to jump into this conversation with you. I love this idea of a podcast, Hell and Back. I love that. So excited to do this. And, I'd say that I feel like I've been there hell and back a few times. I find my life kind of goes like this, maybe a little bit more like this, like slightly elevated each time I do it. But I think overall, it's just, man, I absolutely love my life. That has not always been the case, but I'd say I love my wife. I love being married. I love my family. I love Nashville. And these are things that I never would have thought for myself, but find myself in just this space of, man, I just love waking up in the morning.
Well, that makes me so happy to hear. I've had the incredible gift and blessing of knowing you for a number of years. Some of those years that you would not have used all that language to describe where you were. And I would say the same for me as well, right? I think we've both had the joy and I just say also the privilege of walking alongside one another as we've each been in our own way because of life circumstances taken to our knees and then you know resourced something to get us back out of that place moving forward in life. And so as you know, as we've discussed, the nature of the conversation is this idea of we live long enough, there's nobody who escapes it, right? And if you are one of those people who thinks you have escaped it, I don't mean to say this anyway, but watch out because something's coming that will get beyond you. But that sense of, your life is dynamic and we're going to encounter things that occur. Sometimes they're external things that occur. Sometimes they're things that we create. And then we find ourselves in the midst of something that's our own creation that takes us to our knees. So, as I'm not going to put any chronological references to where you are in your life, other than, brilliant, beautiful, smiling, happy, living in the Southeast, which from a Colorado native perspective, I almost, is a thing by a podcast by itself. um, Southern living, you could, go down that path. But I would love to know, and I'm sure the audience would love to know, like of all the things that you could point to, we might stray in and out of a couple different things, but if you were to pick one story of your life that for you is seminal, we'd love to just kind of have the conversation around that experience and, the idea of the breakdown, the thing that took you to your knees. And then really, for the people who are on this call and going to pay attention, what is it you accessed and resourced to get yourself out of that place? And I say back up and back forward, never knowing what up and forward look like because it's unique to every person. So how about that as a good starting point?
All right, I mean, man, let's just go all the way in there. I love
Let's
that.
go.
Um, one point in my life, and it was early on, in kind of middle school, high school years, but I was really struggling when kind of the transition between elementary school and middle school. I started having symptoms of depression,
Mm.
And that was just not part of our conversation growing up in, rural Colorado in the, early 80s. We just weren't talking about depression. And so I just had no idea. I just know that I went from absolutely loving school and, playing soccer. I was the best on the team. I had friends. I had sleepovers all the time. Things came super easy. Making friends came easy, learning came easy, reading, all of that. So I didn't think about my life much. I just really enjoyed being a kid. And then all of a sudden, starting middle school, it seemed like just like that, all of it vanished. I felt stupid. I felt ugly. I felt like I couldn't make a friend at all. I mean, I ate lunch by myself and it just felt like what happened overnight. My confidence just tanked. I just had zero confidence in myself. I quit playing soccer because I just thought I wasn't good enough.
Wow.
I stopped, doing any kind of extracurriculars and spent most of the time in my room. I just all of a sudden had an incredibly hard time sleeping. I was up a lot at night and then tired during the day. My appetite was zero. So all of these changes just happened, and I'm just like, what is wrong with me? How come I can't do the basic thing? And so I was really struggling and had an older brother who was also struggling at the same time. His with alcohol, drugs.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, I had no clue that he was doing drugs, doing alcohol. I just knew that he was very volatile in our house and he was mean and his moods were, really unpredictable. And so, I just kind of kept all of my stuff to myself and just I want to be the easy kid because he was in such desperation a lot of
Yeah.
the time. And so he ended up going to rehab and spent a year there and came out. And I felt like, hey, I got my brother back. And, it's just starting high school. For me, it was in 10th grade. So I was just starting and I'm like, okay, I got a fresh start here. Um, Things are going to be different. And so I started high school and my brother back at home and we were, working on repairing some of our relationship there. And one night, he was a type 1 diabetic and
Mm.
really never had very good control of his sugars. And so there was a week period where he just was really struggling with his blood sugars. He was having a lot of diabetic reactions. And so early in the week, he had a diabetic reaction while driving and dented the front end of his truck.
Mm.
And Mark, I don't know what it was about that, but I'm pretty mild, it's just like I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I'm kind of the peacemaker and I just
Right.
want everybody to be happy around me. I'm not going to say much, I'm not going to complain. But he came home from school on that Monday and he said, as typical, like, Molly, take me in to get my truck fixed. And I was just like, big F you,
Yeah.
like one you couldn't ask, just there was just something about it and man it triggered me so badly and I let him have it first
Yeah.
time I could remember. And I was, man, years of pent up stuff just came spewing out, like I hate you and you're so selfish and you have no idea, everything in our family's for you, mom and dad spend all of their energy on you, you don't have any idea what my life has been like for, all of this. And I just went off and every obscenity just, man, just
Yeah,
let
you
him,
got it. Both barrels.
just, if you've seen the Christmas Story when Ralphie
Yeah.
is just, and stuff is just spewing. Yeah, that was me, just all in. And then I just slammed my door shut, and it like I kind of felt good, like just gave him a piece of my mind. So obviously I didn't take him to go get his truck fixed, right?
Yeah.
And so the next day I wake up and he and I would usually he'd take me to school in the morning. He had the car, I didn't. And the elementary school also was right next to the high school. So Mark, I was so pissed that morning. I went in on and I got on the elementary school bus
Oh, wow.
as a high schooler to go to school because
Wow.
I didn't want to ride with him. So I didn't talk to him that morning. I just rode the elementary school bus, went to school. And lunchtime, I see him and he's walking down the hall and he's coming towards me and I'm at my locker. If you've ever had that feeling like it's kind of like inside, like I know we're going to be okay, but I still am kind of enjoying being pissed at you. I'm not ready yet. Like I'm just not ready to make nice with you, and I don't know, maybe I want to punish you a little longer, or I just want to be mad a little longer. So he came walking up kind of like he was going to say something, and again, I just slammed my locker and I turned around. And Mark, that was the last time I ever saw him. He got in his truck shortly after that and drove home, had another diabetic reaction in that truck, hit another car and was killed instantly.
Ooh, yeah.
And man, I mean, talk about going to your knees. I just couldn't believe he was gone. I mean, you just don't think something like that ever is going to happen to you. And, so there was initially this buckling of like,
Mm,
I can't believe my brother's gone. Like he was just here this morning, his room is just how he left it. And so, there I was at home, like trying to, well, like, what does this mean that he's not here? And then it hit me like,
mm,
oh my God, my last words to my brother with that, I hated him. And so I took that to mean I am the worst person on the planet. Like, uh, um, people on death row get a better last day than I gave my brother. And that like cycled in my brain over and over. I mean, they get their last meal, they get people to come in and tell them that they love them, they get to say goodbye. And the last words I gave to my brother were like, I hate you and you're selfish and like all of it. And
wow.
that's what I got left with. And so, and, also there was that component that he asked me to take his truck to go get fixed, and I didn't. And he died in that truck the next day. So, if, in my 10-year-old depressed brain, I killed my brother, like if I would have just said yes and taken him to get his truck fixed, he wouldn't have been in that truck that day. So, there I went, all the way down. Like I killed my brother. I'm a horrible person. I gave him the worst last day ever. And, I was already in a pretty deep depression. But after that, I was so suicidal. I just felt like I just kill people, like I make everything worse. I had so much shame about that. I didn't tell my parents that that had happened. So I
Yeah.
carried that all on my own. I never told a soul about that. So 23 years, I just held that as my truth. Like, I'm a horrible person. I have nothing to contribute. In fact, I'm just a big detriment. People around me, like, I make everyone worse. And, um, man, I mean, talk
Wow.
about going low. That was the predominant thought for the rest of high school, all of college, and into my 20s is, you know, I hate myself. I'm
Yeah.
of no value, and I wish I could just get the courage to kill myself.
Wow. First and foremost, I've heard over the duration of our friendship, I'll just say snippets of that story, right? Um, and I just want to thank you. I mean, my body, I could feel just listening and holding all that, just like my heart, like literally got heavy. And, I could feel every single bit of what you experienced and shared. So thank you for the courage and the bravery and the love to share that. I have no idea, like none, how many other people have had a similar journey, like the one you described. And I think even without the specifics of it being their brother and, saying, I hate you, and then something horrible happens, like the end of their life, I can imagine a lot of people coming out of any different variation of that story with that sense of, I'm a horrible person. So there, yeah. So tell me if you can, like that place. I mean, you and I both had a lot of exposure to,
Sure.
resources that now we can look back on and say, wow, if you could only have had the resource of like a Byron Katie and her simple
Sure.
framework to take those thoughts and then, work to turn them around. But my goodness, high school, college, you don't have those skills,
Right.
right? So maybe you could spend a little bit of time if you're willing, to talk about, like, you came in with depression, which, my goodness, today, you think about the challenges that our world faces, and so
Yeah,
many people without, I'll just say, a rudder, and feeling that sense of hopelessness. So maybe you can spend a little more time in that place of,
sure.
yeah, please.
I just want to speak to what you were saying is that so many people, Mark, so many. I thought, that entire time that I was alone,
Yeah.
because nobody was saying it, I just everywhere it's like, oh, I'm happy. How are
Right.
you doing? Great. And just kind
Yeah.
of like I mean, at the time there wasn't social media, but now it just looks
Right.
like everybody's crushing it,
Yeah.
like they're all at Disney World and celebrating anniversaries and life is great. So it feels like you're the only one, but after, over a decade of doing suicide prevention and intervention work, I realized that mindset is at the heart of suicidal ideation. It's
Yeah.
thwarted belongingness. I don't belong where I once did, and feeling like a burden. And so those together really make up suicidal ideation of feeling like I don't fit in here. There's no place for me, and I don't make any contribution. In fact, my existence is a negative. So I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that. And, the events that lead you there really aren't the important thing. It's just that that's, people's experience. And so,
Right.
hey, anybody listening or anybody knowing of anybody, I mean, there's a lot of faces of desperation. There's those that are having that feeling, and my heart is with you. I've been in that space for a very long time in my life, but there's other faces of desperation. There's those that love somebody who's in that space and they would do anything, but they just don't know what to do, and then there's those that have lost somebody to suicide. That's another space of desperation. Why did they do it? What could I have done? All those things, all those roads that you go down. And then those that have had it in their past. So yeah, I think that's why I was so excited to be on this. I mean, we're speaking to so many people, particularly now, that are feeling that whatever place of desperation. And it's interesting, Mark. It's funny how life works and circles back around. But there were a couple things that really helped me out of that stuck place, and the number one thing that helped was your brother,
Hmm.
Todd. It just through my mom in the ski business, our paths crossed. I had no idea about life coaching or anything. It was kind of funny because I had connected with him and he said, oh, I think I could help you with life coaching. And I'm thinking of like, I'd never heard of it. I'm
Yeah.
like, what am I gonna, are you gonna like come to my work with like a pom pom or something and cheer me on? Like, that's what I thought about life coaching. Um, so that having a coach was profoundly, I mean, helpful, saved my life for sure. And there's a ton of them, and I'm sure you will have plenty of them on, Mark, and including yourself. Just unbelievable to have somebody who will listen, and just I think having the opportunity to say what's so for you, um, just
Yeah.
have somebody listen is incredibly powerful. The second thing that comes to mind is another dear friend of both of ours, Steve Chandler,
Yeah.
who has the distinctions, the owner victim distinctions, and that was a real eye opener to me. What is the gosh? I used to have so many copies, and I'd give them away all the time. Reinventing your life or
Reinventing yourself. Yeah.
reinventing yourself. That book I read so many times and really gave me language and acceptance for just this is where I am. I am at the bottom. And
Yeah.
I wanted to resist that and make it all kinds of wrong, but once I could really accept, okay, this is where I am and these are the changes that I want to make. Man, I've been on that journey ever since.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I appreciate you mentioning both of those people, the resources. If you go back to that moment and you were talking and referencing Todd, who just so happens to have
Oh,
coincidentally
right,
been my, the first guest on this
right,
podcast,
right.
bringing his own wisdom and experience and his own journey into,
Yeah.
sort of the hell on earth that he shared in the first podcast. Do you remember specifically what it was that occurred that had you, for the first time, when you were working with Todd, confront those stories that you had, kind of just adopted, right? You adopted these stories. It was as if they were true, and you're living your
Yep.
life out as if they're true. Like, everyone's better without me, and the ones you referenced before.
Yeah.
And then something happened. I'm curious if you remember what it was that happened, what he asked you or what he said to you that kind of had you waking up and thinking, doesn't have to be like this anymore.
Yeah. I find so much humor in it now, which it's so great. But it just, the way life works that, your family was with your family's company in the ski business and my family's in the ski business.
Yeah.
So my mom worked with your parents. And
Yeah.
so it's funny, Todd and I kind of intersected in the ski world. And I, had this when I hit suicidal crisis at 35, I scared myself, which is weird because I'd wanted to die most of my life, and then I got
Yeah.
to the point where I actually really knew in my heart that I could,
Yeah.
and it scared the crap out of me. I was like, I got to start doing something different. And so I had this thought of like, I want to be an author and I want to be a speaker. I want to write a book. And my mom was like, "Oh, you should reach out to Todd. He's a speaker." And I'm like, well, I said I was going to do things different. Normally, if my mom suggested it, that's a hot no. And if it's asking for help, double no. But hey, I'm going to go with it this time. I'm going to listen to my mom and I'm going to ask for help. So I did. And I called Todd, and, it's the most awkward phone call of like, hey, I think I want to be a speaker. And, he's like, what have you done in this realm? And I remember thinking, well, I haven't killed myself.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's all I
Right.
can think of. But anyway, I ended up hiring Todd, and because he knew my mom, he knew that I had a brother who had passed, and he kept asking, Molly, tell me a story about your brother. And I kind of was like,
Yeah.
no
Sure.
way,
Yeah.
like that's something we don't talk about. I just didn't talk about his death growing up, and I didn't talk about any kind of anything emotional or anything growing up. So, the stories that I came up for my grand motivational speech was, this story about skiing, or, I mean,
Yeah.
total surface level. And Todd's
Completely.
like, I don't think these are your story. And after a couple of weeks, he kept saying, Molly, tell me a story about your brother. And I was just like, dude, no. Like, and so I was up in Steamboat and we were doing an in-person talk, and I decided like, oh well, I'll just wow him with my PowerPoint. And I had this PowerPoint with like fade ins and fade outs and fireballs, and it was all like Disney World, and which
Yeah.
really resonated with Todd. No, not at
Yeah.
all. And he just leaned over, kind of as he does. We were at his kitchen table, and he just shut my laptop, and he was just looking at me, and he's like, Molly, what are you so afraid of?
Mm.
And I think this is the first time somebody had really looked at me, like with all that presence, just
Yeah.
really looking at me. And all of that pit that I'd been carrying for 20 something years, all that with my brother, all that self hatred just went like whoop, up in my throat. And I was like, oh gosh, like I think I'm going to lose it. Like I hadn't cried in forever, like decades. I couldn't even try to make myself cry. And it was all right here. And I just was looking at him and I was like swallowing. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
God, don't break down, don't break down. And again, just really looking at me, he said, you can trust me. And I was just looking at him and he's kind of looking at me. And he said, I know you don't think that you can trust me, but you can. And I was like, this dude is reading my mind. Like, how are you doing this? And, you know, Mark, out it came. I just said, I started crying and I just said, I feel like killing myself all the time. And, and then I just cried. And, I said, there is a story about my brother. And that was the first time I'd ever told anybody. I mean, that
Yeah.
was 25 years later. And, and really, Todd didn't say much. He listened and he listened and he listened. And, after I said all of that, I felt so much better, just
Yeah.
speaking my truth and have somebody just powerfully listening and just holding a loving presence, and I think I'd been terrified most of my life that if somebody knew this about me, that they would hate me as much as I did.
Yeah.
And, I'm sitting there, I got tears in my eyes, and Todd got tears in his eyes. We're both crying. And he just looked over and he's like, you know what? I love you now. And those words saved my life and forever changed it.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I was like, if one human being can, I mean, I would have settled for not hate me. I mean, my
Yeah.
bar is pretty low. If you just don't despise me, maybe I'll be okay. But whoa, wait a second. I thought this was like the worst part about me. I thought that the hell of me was the worst part about me. And yet, here's somebody giving me a different experience about maybe my hell is
Mm.
what makes me lovable. And I
Wow.
and I was like, "Oh, maybe this is completely different. Maybe isn't, can I avoid the hell, or can I dust over the hell, or just get through the hell? But maybe the hell is what's really the beauty in me. Maybe this is something that is really fortifying me and making me who I am." So, I think that was a complete turning point in my life. And I'd say from that conversation forward, um, I have not suffered from that story since. Have I had a lot of pain from it? For sure. I mean, there's a lot of healing after that. But I think from that moment on, I was in on a journey of healing, growth, upliftment, transformation. And up until that conversation, I was in just a world of suffering.
Yeah. I mean, wow. Thank you for sharing that. That is such wisdom, right? I mean, and if you fast forwarded from that point, now I think you and I both would acknowledge that it is I'll call it the proverbial hell that we are brought through. It does accentuate, the beauty and the gifts. It's, we want to think, most people want to think, as you mentioned before, turn on social media, and it's that image, that curated image that, people are trying to project, but really it's the stuff that you just walked us through, your story. And I have a similar story, accessed and referenced from a different question, that was the first experience in my life of being taken to my knees. I didn't realize it until somebody in the sanctity of caring enough asked me a question like, do you have a secret you want to share? And yours was, what are you afraid of? Right? These
Yeah.
brilliant, piercing questions. And, and the so much to unpack through just this conversation. One is you don't have to do it alone, right? The sense that, and you, as a person who spent a number of your adult years working with people who were um, in that suicidal ideation phase, thinking about, wondering if their life has value, and recognizing that sometimes it takes that one person, just one person, to reach out or be there. And I love you, I see you, you matter, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you were sharing your story, I was in a state of almost rapture for you, and the
Mm.
idea of, we think that the hell is the hell, but the hell could actually be the exact opposite.
I
But
know.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can't see it. I'm imagining you didn't see it in that moment with Todd, right?
No.
Yeah,
Like, are you kidding me? I would have done anything to remove this. If I could
yeah,
just, and I tried all kinds of things. I tried alcohol, I tried running, I tried
sure,
achieving, I tried perfectionism, I tried
yeah,
school to like run from that. But man, but yeah, what you were saying, Mark, it reminds me, when I was the lowest, when I was really in those dark suicidal places, there were two things that would help me more than anything else. You're not alone,
yeah,
and you are so loved.
mm,
And I wholeheartedly believe that's true of every single person on the planet, that you're not alone. I think it's taken me a long time to realize that we never know the impact that we have. We don't know the impact of our work. We don't know the impact that we have on the people in our lives. The kid that you went to kindergarten with or elementary school, or, like all the years that you have touched lives. I don't think we have any clue as to the level of impact that we have on other human beings.
yeah,
And I also, carry a deep faith too of just how profoundly loved we are.
yeah.
And
I
so,
was going to ask you that question. Does that
yeah.
sense of never being alone and we're always loved. Obviously, you went through a window of time where you were in the throes of becoming an ordained minister, and you and I have a similar faith journey in terms of that groundedness, right? I mean, we each have our own expression of how that occurs in our lives, and but I think that sense of never being alone and always being loved, uh, mine comes from my childhood of faith, and the faith that I still hold today as an absolute truth for me. I know it's not a truth for everybody. Is that what you were referencing when you were talking about that, or were you thinking about never alone and always loved from other people, or both?
I think it's both.
Yeah,
Honestly, I think it's both. And I get that if you're in that suicidal space, that is not your experience. It doesn't feel true.
yeah,
Everything that you see out in the world is evidence that you don't belong and that you're not loved and you're not lovable. I get it. I've been there. Um, but this journey of healing, I really just was after one thing. I want to wake up in the morning. That was my
yeah,
prayer. And that's what I was going for. I just want to have the will to live. That's it.
yeah,
And so this, amazing journey, it has, led all places. I wasn't looking for anything else, but it certainly took me on a spiritual path, and spiritual psychology, and then
right.
spiritual not religious, and then I went fully the other realm into seminary school, and
Yeah,
a senior pastor in the Methodist church. And so I tend to do big swings, but wherever that is, spiritual not religious, or a higher power or something, I do wholeheartedly feel that we have no idea of just how deeply we are connected and how deeply we are loved.
yeah. Well, the amazing part, and I just want to thank you for the gift of putting light on this, is that when we first started out, you were sharing on in this conversation how much joy you have, how much you love your life, you know, and if people just stopped listening at that point in time,
Oh,
they
right,
might certainly miss this whole other
right,
window of
right.
like a couple decades plus
Yeah,
of, self-hate, loathing, isolation, withdrawal, you name it. We could put all kinds of words on that. And it's the miracle of, that path forward and up, whatever that is. And
yeah,
you and I love Richard Rohr as a human being of great wisdom. I know you do too.
yeah.
And, that
Mm,
sense of falling upward. And I think that experience of falling upward and then becoming just more wise, more compassionate, more aware, hopefully loving, and all those things that go along with it. And what an incredible journey you've been on, and what a gift
right,
for me to be here at a front row seat to
right.
all that. Right. I mean,
Yeah, from
uh,
the very beginning of it, for sure.
yeah,
I guess if I can share one more thing,
please.
this plug, and um, of all the suicide prevention that I've done, and the advocacy and the speaking, I think the place I come to today is just sharing your love and your heart and your kindness wherever you are. Whether it's at a gas station, or with your kids, or at the grocery store, or whatever it is, share that piece of your heart. And it is so profound. I mean, I can't even tell you the number of conversations that I've had with people that were said, I was on my way to go kill myself, and somebody smiled, and that was enough. And it's these small, small, small acts that seem so small to us, or just insignificant to us, which are so profound on the other side of it. So again, um, one of our other friends, Stephen McGee, calls him a niggle. It's that inner nudge you get, or just that kind of prompting that you have of like, oh, somebody came to mind this morning, or like, oh, I just thought of my uncle. I haven't thought of him in forever, or oh, somebody I went to college with just popped into my mind, or an old friend, or like, oh, I should pick up that piece of trash, or I should go, that dog's running without a leash, whatever it is. But I think if we all got better about listening to those niggles, that inner intuition, it's profound, and I think it's not that we're not aware of who may need, a phone call or a text or a hug, but it's just getting out of our own way. Like, who cares if it's awkward, or it's embarrassing, or it's like, let's get awkward, let's get weird, let's get embarrassing, but let's follow those niggles and reach out and connect. Let's say I love you. Let's let people know that. Let's
Yeah,
share from our hearts. Let's do those things, and I think that would make a profound difference for all these faces of desperation, to just get better about saying, hey, you mean something to me. I haven't seen you in years, and and I'm saying this to you right now, Mark. I mean,
yeah,
I feel that way about you as well, just how much I love you and your family, Todd. What an impact you all have had, certainly on my life. I'm here today because of your family. So
yeah.
I love that your light and what you do in the world. And man, it's made a profound difference for me, for sure.
Well, I would say the same back to you. I love you. You know that. I feel it all the time, and I'm so blessed to have had you as part of my life, and so blessed to have had you here in this sacred space as you shared just an incredible story, and then the journey out of that story to the point where you're now where you are. It makes me beam with happiness for you, because I've seen all the other variations. And so it's like liberation, right? Liberation
Yeah.
through love, through self-acceptance, through,
Yeah.
yeah. So, first and foremost, thank you. You have been
Mm.
just such a gift to be in this conversation with. My love for you is just nothing but deepened and broadened and strengthened as a result of this conversation. You are an amazing author. You've got a new book coming out. You have written other books, and you're also speaking. Do you mind spending a minute and let somebody know how they can get a hold of you, or what the name of your new book is, in case they want to look for it, and when it might be available?
Sure. I mean, very timely as to this conversation. The magic is in the mess. You
Yeah,
know, it's not getting through the mess, but man, it's just really seeing that's the good part. So, my book, really is about the last year or so of my life. I got kicked out of the United Methodist Church. I came out at 47. I got divorced. I married a woman. I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and wow, talk about mess! Like I just blew up my whole life, and it's funny. I've never been happier. So really sharing that story and all the things that were still in the way. So excited to get that book out. It should be out, towards the end of this year.
yeah,
And more speaking. mollybooker.com. You can find me on Instagram. I posted the other day about doing yoga and dancing in my underwear. So if that is any inkling of the joy that I find in my everyday,
yeah.
yeah, doing yoga in your underwear with your elf shoes
I like it. That's
in the
awesome.
kitchen. Hey,
Yeah, sure. Well, I was when we talked before we started the podcast, I had asked if you had one resource, like what resource would that be? And if you had one piece of advice, and you've already given so much to anybody listening to this, to myself included, right? Yeah, but if there was a resource that has, made a significant difference in your journey, and then just a thought for somebody to consider, what would those two things be before we end?
yeah, oh gosh, so many. One, life coaching, Steve Chandler, Stephen McGee, or Mark Musselman, Todd Musselman, wonderful coaches, Greg Aden, I mean, a whole handful of them, but any of those, I mean, all I've spent a lot of time with, and life-changing conversations. So that I'd highly, highly recommend. Also Steve Chandler's owner-victim work, Todd Musselman does a lot with that as well. Um, Another thing too is faith, whatever that may be, and wherever it feels accessible, whether it's getting outside and just seeing the beauty, in the desert or the ocean or the mountains, or, wherever you may be, or maybe it's church, maybe it's religion, maybe it's spirituality, maybe it's yoga,
Right.
maybe it's cooking or dancing in your underwear, whatever that may be, but leaning into something bigger than yourself. I also think, for those struggling with desperation, particularly suicidal desperation, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has done incredible work. AFSP.org. and their website has tons and tons of resources. So certainly know you're not alone, and there's people out there that would love to talk to you right now. The number, you can certainly find online, AFSP. So all of
Yeah.
those. Um,
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I have hotlines, really not, I'm blessed to not have a need right now in my life for them, but I keep them in my phone, which is something that when I went to a suicide prevention training that somebody I know led, Miss Booker,
yeah,
you was put those numbers in your phone.
yeah.
And so
One
I
of
have,
them,
yeah,
it,
I've had
yeah,
recent need to
mm,
pass that number along to somebody who found themselves at the bottom of the pit and reached out that night to the hotline and made their way forward as a result of the incredibly um, you know present staff that's on those lines waiting for people who are kind of just
sure.
profoundly feeling stuck. So yeah, put them in your phone.
There's another one. The National Suicide Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255. And I think there's one now that is a 3-digit that you
It is.
can
Yeah, you're
do
right.
as
I
well.
want to say it's 911, but I'm not sure if that's the right number. But there is a 3-digit code that the government created, kind of
Hmm.
like, no, 911 is emergency. I think
Right, right,
it's,
right.
yeah, yeah, that's my mistake. So anyway, something along those lines. And I don't know what that code is. And I probably should have before I got on this call with you. But yeah, all of that is just brilliant to have at your fingertips and to be able to, it may not be you, it may be somebody you love, right? So
Right.
just having that available to provide as a resource. Molly, thank you. You are brilliant and beautiful and powerful, all those things, and even more so now that we've had this conversation. You've been such a gift to have, and blessings to you and to Kelly as you continue to dance in your underwear in the kitchen and make a beautiful life in Nashville, Tennessee. And I can't wait to connect with you again after all this is said and done. And it's been an honor to have you as a guest. Love
Thank
you.
you, Mark. Love you. Love you
Yep.
too.
Yep.
And
Okay.
look forward to more.
Cheers.